All right, I have the perfect room here to show you how to get started in real estate photography. Small room, probably 10 feet by 11 feet, gray painted walls, white ceiling, which is great for bouncing our flash off of, a white door right beside me, which flash will reflect off that too, bonus there. Has a ceiling fan, so I'm gonna need to watch to make sure there's no shadows by the ceiling fan caused by my flash. And we have a window, not much of a view, but it's a nature view, so I want to make sure that I can see out the window. So the first thing I want to do in here is figure out where my first composition is going to be. I like to start right at the door, and I usually get 2 shots of a basic room like this. But I'm going to start with the first shot right here at the door. And what I'm going to work on is my composition, getting everything level, vertical's vertical. And what that means is that the left and right side, anything that goes up and down is up and down and not tilted back, forward, or sideways. So easy to do with my geared head. So I'm going to get my composition. And let's talk about leveling for just a moment here. I'll try to make this brief. So my geared head has a bubble leveler on there. When I first got it, I used to center it on that bubble and think that all my shots would be perfectly centered, but they weren't. Next, I had a bubble leveler, the kind that fits on the hot shoe. Tried that, figured all my pictures would have to be level because, I mean, it's sitting right on top of the camera. It makes sense to me. Still off. However, when I use the leveler that's built inside the camera so it's on the display, well, guess what? When I get that one level, everything's perfect every time. Here's my point and my tip. If you want to use, which I would recommend, your bubble leveler, whether it be whichever bubble leveler you're looking at, go ahead and get your leveler that's built inside the camera, make it to where it's perfectly level. Then look at your bubble leveler and see where it's at. So in other words, when I have my leveler level inside the camera, my bubble leveler is actually up and to the left. So therefore, if I'm going fast at a fast pace, I can go ahead and get my bubble leveler done real quick, and I have it up and to the left just a little bit. So I know where it is center with my bubble. And that way I don't have to go inside the camera every time, change the controls to get to the leveler just to get everything level. It will kill too much time. Anyway, once we get everything level inside the camera, I need to find a focal point, something to focus on. Now in this room there's no furniture, there's no nothing. I mean, you're really not gonna be able to focus on a blank wall. Luckily, we have a window here, so I'm gonna go ahead and focus on this window. But while we're on the subject, if you are pointed at some blank walls, because that's your second angle, and there's nothing to get your focus on, take one of your stands, put it out there in the middle of the room or wherever you really wanna focus on your light stand, lock in that focus, move the stand out of the way, and then continue to take your photos. Just remember before you move and go to your next shot to unlock it so it's not locked into the focus, the wrong one for all the rest of your shots. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and lock the focus onto the window. Next, we're gonna go ahead and start taking photos. I've got a weird looking flash. You can use any flash you want. I'm using it in manual. All right, and before I use flash, I'm looking at my exposure indicator and it's saying a perfectly exposed picture is a 60th of a second, but it's lying. I'm gonna tell you why it's lying. There is a window right there pointed straight at this camera, throwing everything off. So if I tried to use that, it's going to not be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually darken up the room just a little bit. If I leave that exposure indicator in the middle, my guess is that window is going to be a little bit overblown, and I'd kind of like to see that nature scene outside of the window. So instead of going by my camera's recommended exposure, I'm going to go from a 60th of a second to a 100th of a second. Let me explain. The reason I'm going to 100th of a second is I'm actually exposing for outside of the window. So what am I doing about the inside? Well, that's what this is for. I'm going to illuminate the inside, hopefully correctly, and hopefully the outside, since I'm exposing for that, will be exposed correctly where we could see out of the window. I cannot use my flash and light up outside. So therefore, I'm setting my shutter speed to do all the work for that. But I can use my flash on the inside. And with a white ceiling and a white door behind me, my work's pretty easy for this one. So let's get started. All right, so on my first shot, I am at 100th of a second, 7.1 f-stop, which I'm usually always at 7.1, and an ISO of 320, which I usually am always to that. Why 320? Why not 100? At 100, my flash has to work a lot harder and more, so I have to turn it up more. At 320, it makes my flash a lot more powerful. So that's why. Here we go. So I'm gonna start at, let's say an 1/8 power. It's in manual. So an 1/8, here we go. Pointing it straight up and not right over the camera. If I did it right over the camera, it'd be really flat. I have it to the right. You could put it to the left. I'm going to the right because there's a door right here. So let's take a look at photo number 1. It's a little dark, but I can see out the window. And another thing there that I see is we've got some shadows, no surprise, caused by the ceiling fan. Next shot, I'm going to put this to a 1/4 of a second, or excuse me, yeah, 1/4 of a second there, or a 4th power on my flash. Do the same thing. Now, one thing I need to mention though is look at my flash height. We're going to talk about that in a second, because if you put it too high, you'll throw a shadow from that ceiling fan on the wall opposite of you. Go too low and you're really illuminating the ceiling too much. So here we go again. All right, second shot. I like it. Everything seems really good inside and outside. Things I don't like would be the shadows up by the ceiling fan. Now, I will never just take one shot and say, oh, that's good, let me go to the next room. I want more photos to where if I need to move a shadow or there's a glare somewhere, I have another shot from a different angle that I can use to blend in corrections or blend out things that really suck in my photo. I'm going to do another shot from the other side so I can kind of move shadows around a little bit. And then last but not least, I like to take a shot extending my arm so you can see my armpit. Now, extending my arm up a little bit more, and this one's going to be just for the ceiling. Now I'm going to do something different here before I just click away. If I leave all my settings the same and raise the flash as high as I can, and instead of down here, it will create less of a bounce, because when this goes up, it spreads out, hits the ceiling, and then it spreads back down. When you raise it up, it doesn't have as much time to spread out. So it'll actually be a little bit darker. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm at 100th of a second. I'm going to actually lighten it to a 50th of a second. Remember, all I'm working on is the ceiling, just to lighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to leave my flash still at a 4th power. Raise it up and take that photo. And as you can see from that photo, what I have is a fairly smooth ceiling without the shadows. Now we get to have the fun of putting this together in Photoshop, which shouldn't take very long. Okay, I have all 4 of our pictures opened up in Adobe Raw. And the first thing I'm going to do is apply all my settings that I always do to all my photos here. And that's basically some sharpening, lens correction, things like that. So I'm going to go up to sharpening, and I'm going to go ahead and put in what I normally put in, which is 48, 1.4, 48, 100, and then for noise reduction 15. I always go over to lens correction, click remove chromatic, click on enable profile correction, which allows Adobe Raw to figure out what lens I'm using, and once it detects it, it fixes some of the distortion that's naturally found in that lens. And then I'm going to go over and just put in some clarity, which is usually 15. All right. So anyway, those are things I do to all my photos. If this was a full photo shoot and I had them all loaded, I would apply these to all the photos, then I'd work on them. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to tweak them in Adobe Raw, not yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open these all up in Photoshop, and I'm going to blend some photos together. So before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see what photos I want to keep and which ones I don't. This one's too dark, so I'm not even going to mess with this one. My second shot doesn't look half bad, so this is just something I do to mark the ones that I want to keep. I'm going to Command 8. Wasn't necessarily meant for this to make this a certain color. Labels, it was used for other purposes, but I use it to pick the ones I want to keep. And this is the next shot is the flash moved to the left instead of the right. So I'm going to keep that one as well. And then the next one was, again, raising the flash up and my ceiling shot. So I'm going to keep that one. So I'm going to open these three, shift and select all three of these, leave out the dark one, click on Open Images, which will open these all up in Photoshop. Okay, we have our photos opened up in Photoshop. Here's photo number 1, 2, and 3. All right, so I'm going to blend parts I like about photo 1 with parts I like with photo 2. Let's teeter back and forth between 1 and 2. 2, I like the outside shot a little bit better. It's a little bit darker, and all I did was move the flash from one side to another. Go figure. Look at my shadow up there at the top where the ceiling fan is. So both those shots, because they were the same height, just left and right, just push the shadow around a little bit. All right, so I'm going to take one, and I'm going to hit Command A to select everything, Command C to copy, select the second picture, and Command V to paste it. So now I have photo 1 over the top of photo 2. And if you hear random licking, my black lab decided to sit beside me and start licking herself. So, okay. All right, I'm going to create a mask on the top layer. It's a white mask, so I am going to paint with black. And I'm going to set the opacity rather low, somewhere in the 20 range. And again, I'm going to teeter back and forth between the two and see what do I want to bring in. All right, so I think I'm going to bring in, or darken it in over here, bring in the picture below it. So here we go. Got my brush tool, I'm going to make it big. And I'm going to kind of bring in a little bit of area here. Really not much difference between one shot versus the other. So let's see, before, after. All right, see this little line right here? I'm going to get rid of that too. So let me brush that in. There we go. Gets rid of that because there wasn't that line on the second photo. And I think other than that, we're good. We're not going to split hairs here. All right, so I'm going to right click and flatten the image. Now, what I'm going to do is take that image and I'm going to hit Command A, Command C, and Command V over the third image. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend in my ceiling from the last picture in with the merged version of our first two photos. So I'm going to go ahead and make the mask. And I am going to grab my brush tool again. And I am gently going to brush in to get rid of that shadow. Okay, so there we go. That got rid of the shadows up there. I'm going to lower this just a little bit more, make a little brush stroke there. All right, so I'm going to right click and flatten that image. Now we have the photo ready for its final step that I like to do in Adobe Raw. Okay, here's our image that we blended together here in Adobe Raw again. What I'm just simply going to do is make sure that my verticals are perfectly vertical. Here we see the right side. You can just barely see where the wall is there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the transform tool, and I always use either the A for auto or the V for vertical just to check things. I'm going to click A, made a little bit of adjustment. I'll teeter back and forth so you can see the adjustment. Now I'm going to try the vertical. Here's the toggle between vertical applied and not applied. So there was a little bit of a correction that needed to be made. That's fine. All right, so I've made that correction, and from this point, I am ready to go ahead and send this to the real estate agent. Thanks for watching that video. Hopefully it helped you a little bit. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you feel like you've learned at least $1 worth of information from this, check out our Patreon page. And for all you new people out there, there's a lot of perks on the Patreon page for you to check out. See you in the next video.